Hello, welcome back to my world of stuff. It's Saturday, the 5th of April 2025, and that means we are now just 7 days away from a brand new series of Doctor Who. Season 2, or Season 15, or Season 41, or whatever you want to call it, in the chronology of Doctor Who. And I thought I would just sit down and just chat about the state of the Doctor Who nation at the moment, how the show is culturally, and how I personally, as a lifelong Doctor Who fan, feel about the show as it heads into its 21st new year on television since it came back in 2005. I didn't do a video last week, I think it was last week, to celebrate the 20th anniversary of New Who, as it's often called, because I didn't think there was much more I had really left to say. I think over the last couple of years, I've done a couple of videos about favourite episodes and favourite Doctors, and I didn't really want to rehash all that. And I know that some people talked about favourite moments, but that's just too specific for my tiny mind to pluck out moments from individual episodes, because the appreciation of Doctor Who for me is about the whole package: the story, the writing, the direction, the visual look of it, the performances, the script, the story, the whole thing, rather than little bits here and there. What I want to talk about now is the anticipation level, my own personal anticipation level for the new series of Doctor Who. So let's get to it. Yes, so there we are. I've got a Doctor Who t-shirt out in honour of the occasion of talking about Doctor Who, because although I am a massive fan of Doctor Who, I don't do that much Doctor Who content on this channel. Somebody did once refer to this as a Doctor Who channel, but it very much isn't. It's very much just part of the makeup of the channel, because I'm a Doctor Who fan and I will always talk about the show. So if there's new Blu-rays out or if there's new things coming, I will talk about them here and review them here, and of course I do occasional retros looking back at classic Doctor Who serials. But I don't just churn out clickbait videos every time there's a news item about Doctor Who. News, big news, huge news, this is happening, that's happening, this rumour, that rumour. I'm not interested in all that sort of stuff. I'll talk about Doctor Who from a factual perspective and from its place as a cultural icon, a British cultural icon, and where it stands in terms of all the stuff that's going on in the world at the moment. So we have a new series coming up in 7 days' time. And how do I feel about that? I don't feel hugely excited about it, which is a bit odd because Doctor Who is in my blood, it's in my DNA, it's in my veins. So I am naturally inclined to be very excited about a new season of Doctor Who. And whilst I'm very much looking forward to it, and of course I will watch it, it is one of the few TV programmes I actually watch as part of the linear TV schedule these days. Much as I do support the idea of linear TV, I don't watch much of it. I tend to watch catch-up, as most of us do. I tend to watch streaming things. The beauty of modern television is you watch it when you want to. But Doctor Who is one of the shows that I think historically is a show I watch when it's on, and I always like to watch it when it's on. I won't be watching the 8 a.m. BBC iPlayer releases, which are happening every Saturday morning. I won't be doing that. I'll be waiting a few hours till I can watch it with the nation, or however much of the nation decides to watch it. And I think it's 10 to 7, the first episode is screening next week. So why don't I feel hugely excited about it? Well, I think there are several reasons for that. One is the fact that this season, and it is the second season we've had within the space of a year, to be fair, because the last season, Shooting Gatwa's first season, started airing last May, so it's now back 11 months later, which is quite nice because there's often very long gaps between Doctor Who seasons. But I think the fact that it's back so quickly with another batch of episodes is, as we know, purely because they film these seasons pretty much back to back. And we know that once this season is finished, there is no more Doctor Who in the can. We know that we're not going to get another season in a year's time because the future of the show is up in the air, technically, although I think that there will be more Doctor Who. But I think because of the way it's now funded and distributed and all the different bodies who are involved, it isn't like the old days where the BBC would say, yep, we'll have another season of Doctor Who, and then they would make it and budget it and it would happen. Now, because Disney are involved and they're putting money into it, it's a very different proposition. It's a bit more international and there's more involved. And of course, there are all sorts of issues at the moment about problems in the TV industry with funding and so on. I don't think those are necessarily going to be massive problems for Doctor Who because it is a recognised brand. And whilst its popularity rises and falls and rises and falls, it's always a fairly good bet in terms of an investment, a financial investment for a TV production, because it is going to sell, it is going to make money. There are merchandise opportunities, spin-offs and so on, licensed things that will always bring in money. I think Doctor Who is a show that the BBC will be prioritising whatever happens down the road with the licensing agreement that's coming up in a couple of years' time, because it is one of the BBC's hitters. It's one of the BBC's brands, and I think whether it's in a creative low at the moment or an audience low, and I'll talk about that in a bit, it's a pretty good bet for the BBC as a show that they can market and do well with. The reason I'm not hugely looking forward to it, I think, is the fact that there are just 8 episodes. I mean, I know that's a very modern thing now with TV shows on the streaming age. We get 8 episodes or 10 episodes or 6 episodes because TV productions are more like mini films these days. The production values are on screen. They cost more to make, so there are going to be less episodes. We're now a long way from the days when, certainly American shows, I think it probably still happens on the American networks with their police procedurals and detective shows and so on, they would churn out 24, 26 episodes a year. I mean, Doctor Who used to do that back in the 70s, but of course, those were 24, 26 half-hour episodes, quite modestly budgeted. But I think in the first few years of Doctor Who's comeback from 2005 onwards, we were used to having 13-episode seasons, and that gave you a nice bunch of episodes to get your teeth stuck into, 3 months of Doctor Who. And it allowed, in a new era where you had the companion characters being developed and the Doctor being developed, it allowed more time for the characters to bed in and feel part of the Doctor Who furniture, and for them to go on their own journeys alongside their journeys with the Doctor. I think 8 episodes doesn't let that happen so much. There isn't so much breathing space, and I think we saw that last year with the series that introduced us to Millie Gibson as Ruby Sunday, because she had her whole story arc, not just of travelling with the Doctor and learning about travelling with the Doctor, but the overarching mystery of her mother and who her mother was and why her mother had abandoned her. And I think there was so much stuff going on for her that you never felt that she and the Doctor formed a proper travelling relationship. And I think that she was sort of there, then she was gone, and then she left at the end of the series. Now I know she's back in the new series, so her story isn't finished. But I never really felt that they bonded as they should as a TARDIS team, because I just didn't see enough of them. And bearing in mind that 2 of the episodes, the Doctor was barely in because of Ncuti Gatwa's filming schedule on Sex Education delayed him being available to start on Doctor Who, so 2 episodes had to be crafted with him pretty much cameoing in the episodes. So we had 6 episodes with him and the Christmas special, The Church on Ruby Road. So I didn't feel there was time for those bonds to forge between those 2 characters. Another issue I have, I think, is with the Doctor himself, Ncuti Gatwa. I like Ncuti. He's very lively personalities. He's very jolly, he's very upbeat. But there are 2 issues I have, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, no doubt. I do despair of the fact that there's no look to him. He wears different clothes in every episode. There's no recognisable image that is the Doctor, which must be hell for licensees who want to produce action figures and merchandise, because you never know what he's going to wear next. And some of his fashion sense is outrageous to somebody of my age, I suppose. He wears kilts and these clothes that they're not the sort of things that you expect the Doctor to wear. Now, that's not a problem in itself, because he's a handsome young man, he's a clothes horse, he can wear what he likes. And I think that's obviously where they've gone. I think it's interesting. He was on a show recently. I mean, there's been so much publicity stuff lately about the show. But he was saying that he had an image of the Doctor wearing like a tweed jacket, sort of almost like a fusty professor type thing. But they opened it up and said, no, different costumes for every episode. And I think, personally, I think that works against establishing the Doctor. Because when you had John Pertwee in his Inverness capes and his frilly shirts and jackets, it was a look, but it wasn't a costume, because he changed regularly. He had different coloured jackets on, different coloured capes. It was a type of clothing that Doctor would wear. And even Tom Baker, with his multicoloured scarf, he had different types of jackets, boots. There was a variation. It changed from story to story. You got more into the costume look, actually, with Peter Davison, Colin Baker and Sylvester McCoy, where John Nathan Turner, the producer, wanted everybody in recognisable costumes, even the companions. Certainly in Peter Davison's time, for the first couple of years, they wore the same clothes in every story. There was very much that defined look. I don't want to go down that level because I think wearing exactly the same clothes all the time is a bit weird. But I think it's always possible to vary things. Christopher Eccleston did it. He had a leather jacket with different coloured tops. David Tennant had a couple of different suits and he'd wear different clothes in different situations. And that's happened really for all the Doctors, that they've had variations on a look. And I think that Ncuti Gatwa having no defined look does his incarnation no favours, because there's nothing distinctive about him visually. I do like, and again, this is something I've said before, so excuse me for repeating myself, I like that long leather mustard coloured jacket that he wears sometimes, and bluish trousers and different tops. I think that's a good look, and I think they could have worked around that with maybe a short jacket occasionally or a longer jacket or whatever. But I think just in different jumpers and t-shirts and things, it makes him look a bit too ordinary. That's the problem. And I think also with his incarnation, because he's a young, vibrant, lively man, he is young and vibrant and lively on screen, and there's a lot of jumping around and leaping about and laughing, and it's almost too much. Sometimes I think less is more with the Doctor, and it's like the early Tom Baker stories where he would be in the story in the background and he'd be thinking, and I miss that slower pace, I suppose, that you would have in certainly in 70s Doctor, which is sort of the classic era for me, where the pace was a bit slower and the mystery was introduced at a slower pace and the Doctor moved at a slower pace. Of course, now we've got 45-minute episodes and you have to rush in and get on with it and jump about and leap about, and it can be a bit exhausting. And I think one of the main things that's made me a little bit less excited than I should be about a new series of Doctor Who is that the most recent episode that we had, Stephen Moffat's Joy to the World on Christmas Day, was the worst Doctor Who episode I've ever seen, and I maintain that position. I hated that episode with a passion, and I still can't believe I wasted an hour of my life watching it, but I'll never watch it again. And I think that's really has sort of tainted my enjoyment of the show, my anticipation for it, because the most recent episode was so bad. I'm sure when the new series starts, if the first couple of episodes are really good, it will ramp up the anticipation and excitement again, and I'll be back in the room. But at the moment, my most recent experience of Doctor Who leaves a very nasty taste in the mouth, so that soured me a bit about what's to come, because they could deliver an episode like that. Well, yeah, I don't know what to say about that episode, other than the fact that I aboard it. And another factor, again, I suppose, working against Doctor Who is that it's now working in a very crowded landscape as far as science fiction, fantasy, genre television is concerned. It's not the lone wolf anymore. When it came back in 2005, we didn't have this sea of streaming services and this sea of product. It's endless stream of shows being pumped out by Apple TV, Paramount, Disney, Prime Video, Netflix. They're all churning out really good quality genre shows. There's a lot of very challenging and imaginative shows out there. There have been some shows on TV this year I've enjoyed incredibly. I've spoken about a couple of them. I did a video about Paradise a few weeks ago, which is my favourite show of the year. And concurrently with Doctor Who returning, we've got a new series of Charlie Brooker's Black Mirror, which is out next week, which I'm actually looking forward to more than Doctor Who, because it's an anthology show. You never know what you're going to get. And we've got The Last of Us back for its second season, I think just after Doctor Who comes back. It's a crowded genre at the moment. There's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of really good television out there. And Doctor Who is just part of the noise now, part of the soundtrack. It isn't able to quite stick its head over the parapet in quite the same way. And of course, we know Doctor Who is unique. Its format is unique. And I still love that spine-tingling concept of this alien in a police box travelling through time and space. It is quintessentially British and quintessentially quirky. But in terms of genre entertainment, it's just one voice in a crowd. And I think it has to speak a little bit louder to be heard these days. So we're back on TV next week. We've seen all the trailers. It's been a busy couple of weeks, a month or so. And I'm very pleased that the BBC have continued the tradition of really advertising the show really well. I think there's been some very clever stuff done. We've had the traditional trailers themselves. We've had those little idents that have appeared on BBC. Now, as I said, I don't watch a lot of linear television, but I have caught some of these idents, which are images of a London taxi floating through space, or the Eiffel Tower floating through space. This is all presumably connected in some way to storyline later on in the series. We've had these little clips which have been running where the Doctor and his new companion Belinda, played by Varada Sethu, they are being transposed into various other British television programmes. I've seen a couple of those, are very amusing. In The Boardroom, in The Apprentice, in the Queen Vic, at the time of the famous "Get Out of My Pub" incident with Barbara Windsor. I think there's also one where they arrive on the set of The Gladiators. I think there's been a couple of others, but those are the ones I've seen. So it's quite nice that the BBC are still doing this sort of unusual advertising for Doctor Who, because they don't do stuff like that for any other show. You get a trailer, you get short trailers, you get press things, but you don't get these specially shot little idents, which I think is a vote of confidence in the show, and it shows that the BBC are still very much behind it. Trailers themselves have been great. I mean, I will say that I'm very impressed visually by what I've seen. One of my complaints about the last series is that for all the talk of the money that Disney had pumped into the show as part of their distribution deal, I didn't see a lot of it on screen. The last season didn't really present very much that I didn't think the BBC could do on its own, with its own budgets. There was nothing there, for example, that I hadn't seen in the Jodie Whittaker seasons. Now, before you all start screaming, hashtag not my doctor, whatever you think of the Jodie Whittaker era, it was beautifully filmed and it was very visual and very big and it looked spectacular. They still maintain there are episodes of the Flux series which looked astonishing. War of the Sontarans, Village of the Angels. They had a big scale and scope to them. And when you think that the Flux series was made during the pandemic era, it's extraordinary that it looked like that. And there was nothing in the last series that compared. However, for what I've seen of the trailers of the new series, it is bigger. There's more visual stuff. The money is on the screen. Big stuff. Giant robots, giant spider creature, an animation creature that appears in the second episode. It looks bigger, broader. It looks like what you would think Disney would have wanted first time around. So I'm looking forward to it from a visual point of view. And I do always look forward to Doctor Who. I'm not sitting here going, oh, I'm fed up with Doctor Who. It's just that my levels of anticipation are dialed back a little bit, and I'm trying to explain the reasons for that. So we look at the actual run of stories, and I didn't do specifically a couple of weeks ago a video about the individual episode titles when they were released, but I'm going to do something now to talk about the episodes and what I think we can possibly expect. The first episode is called The Robot Revolution. It's written by Russell T Davies and directed by Peter Hoare, one of 2 episodes he's done. Very experienced TV director. He's directed things like Daredevil. He's directed episodes of Russell T Davies's brilliant apocalyptic series It's a Sin, which is coming to Netflix, incidentally. If you've never seen it, please track it down and look at it. And he's directed things like The Last of Us. He knows his way around genre television. I think he's a safe pair of hands for the first episode. And it's very much a sci-fi story about robots coming to Earth, and I've pieced together what the story is about because I've read some of the press things, and it sounds dark but with a little bit of lightness about it as well. I think it's going to be a better season opener than last year's Disastrous Space Babies, which I don't know what they were thinking, showing that as the first episode of the series. That was an idea that you sort of throw away because it's too silly. But this looks like a much better and stronger story to start the season. Then we have Lux, which is written by Russell T Davies and directed by Amanda Brocci. This looks interesting as well. This is a period story set in the 1950s in America, which seems to involve a cartoon character who comes out of the screen and starts causing mischief. Seems to have elements of last year's Devil's Chord to it. And I think certain elements of this series are going to touch on the Harbingers and these supernatural creatures which we've been seeing in the last series. This looks like quite a fun and dark episode. One of the themes of this series, as you probably know, is that the Doctor has his new companion, Belinda, but can't get her back to Earth for some reason. When they try to get back to the modern day, they're bounced off into the past or out into space. So I think we've got, unusually, a series that isn't largely set on modern day Earth. Third episode, The Well, is written by Russell T Davies and newcomer Sharma Angel Walfall. This looks interesting. This looks hard sci-fi. It's set in distant space in the far future, and it seems to be something to do with people dropping down a well of some sort, whether it's a gravity well or a physical well, I'm not sure. But there's lots of scenes in the trailer of people in sort of space costumes or diving costumes falling great distances. It looks intriguing. Episode 4 brings us back down to earth with the return of Millie Gibson as Ruby Sunday. She is back in an episode written by Pete McTeague. He's written many Doctor Who episodes before. He's involved in the upcoming Unit spin-off, The War Between the Land and the Sea, and he has written and directed some of those little teasers that we've had in the past for the Doctor Who Blu-ray collections, which unfortunately seem to have fallen by the wayside. This is also directed by Peter Hoare, and this, I believe, promises to revisit Ruby on Earth, suffering from a bit of PTSD from her experiences with the Doctor. And I think there's involvement with Unit and secrets with Unit and so on. And although it seems to suggest that it could be a Dr. Light episode, I've just been reading this morning Russell T Davies, so no, the Doctor is in it a lot. It's not a Dr. Light episode in the way that last year's were. Then we have an episode I know very little about. It's by Inua Allams, who apparently is a very experienced poet and playwright. It's called The Story and the Engine. This is directed by newcomer Macalla McPherson. And this, I believe, is set in Lagos. This is an historical episode. I know nothing about the story. I don't know anything about what's going on. So it's quite intriguing that that's a bit of a mystery. This is followed up by episode 6, the Interstellar Song Contest. You'll have seen in the trailer clips with Ryland Clark and a play on the Eurovision Song Contest. This is due to be screened on the night of the actual Eurovision Song Contest, depending, of course, on whether the FA Cup, which is on the same day, overruns or not. I think Russell T Davies has said that if it does overrun, Doctor Who will play on Sunday instead, but of course it'll be on the iPlayer. But hopefully it'll be a nice bit of TV magic if it airs on the same night as the Eurovision Song Contest, which will follow straight afterwards. This is written by Juno Dawson and directed by a newcomer Ben A. Williams. Then the series finishes off, yes already, with the two-parter Wish World and the Reality War, both written by Russell T Davies, both directed by Alex Sanjeev Pillai. Again, don't know anything about this. Of course, it's another big bombastic two-part Russell T Davies. Oh my God, the stakes are so high finale. But again, from the clips we've seen, the return of units, we know that Ruby is there. We know that Bonnie Langford is there. I have heard, as you may well also have heard, some rumours about what happens at the end of this story, which has certain repercussions for the Doctor. But they are just rumours, so I'm not going to repeat them here. But if they are true, and they could well be because they sound very dramatic, could have a huge impact on the future of the show, certainly for this incarnation of the Doctor. So that's what we've got to look forward to, and I am looking forward to it because the trailers look great. But I think it's just because there has been so much fuss about Doctor Who over the last few months. There's been a lot of speculation in the press that dampens the enthusiasm a bit because it's trying to make the show out to be a flop and a failure. These articles have been very annoying, and I think I did a video about them a few months back. They're so exhausting and so tiring because they're based on false information and false data. They're reporting low viewing figures, but they just look at the overnight viewing figures without reporting much healthier 7 and 28-day viewing figures. They ignore the fact that last year Doctor Who was in the top 10 TV ratings pretty much every week, and the Christmas Day episode had a very high rating that put it, I think, number 6 in the week's ratings. They ignore all the factual information about how ratings data is interpreted these days, and they genuinely look back at the figures from last season and say, but David Tennant was getting 10 million viewers. That was 15 years ago, and the ratings world has changed. But you're never going to get that perspective presented in a clickbait internet headline or a newspaper headline. They want people to read Doctor Who flopping, ratings terrible, everyone sacked. That's just nonsense. That is at best misleading, at worst plain wrong. So I'm looking forward to Doctor Who, but the anticipation level is muted a little bit this year for all the reasons that I've tried to explain. And yeah, possibly a little bit because of uncertainty about the future, because you don't know what's going to happen. I suspect that there are plans in place. Russell T Davies has constantly said we don't know about the future of Doctor Who until Disney make up their mind after this season has aired. So whether that means that Disney will pull out and the BBC and Bad Wolf, who make the show, will have to find another funding model, I can't imagine they're just sitting twiddling their thumbs and hoping that Disney will renew. They must be considering the other options and considering the other possibilities that if Disney do pull out, they will have to find other funding, whether they fund it internally through the BBC, which sort of seems a bit unlikely these days, or whether they've already made inquiries about other streamers who may be interested in taking it on. Because I can't imagine that somebody with Russell T Davies's experience will just be sitting there going, oh, I hope they renew us. I know that scripts are being written, some pre-production has been done, there are no immediate plans for filming, but I suspect that once they know what's happening, if Disney say, yes, please, we'll have more. If Disney don't, they will go somewhere else for funding, and they will get the show up and running again quickly. And I think they could do it quickly enough to get a Christmas special ready for this year, because that's always been a big thing that Russell T Davies has been keen on. One of the big things of the new era of Doctor Who is the big Christmas Day episode. Whilst those Christmas Day episodes, like most Christmas Day episodes, aren't as big as they were, I think it still shows good faith in the show that the BBC will carve a little hour on Christmas Day to show an episode of Doctor Who. It's still that special. So ultimately, this is where we are. I am looking forward to the return of Doctor Who, but normally a week before a new season of Doctor Who, I would be sort of counting down the days and looking at my watch. God, it's still only Monday. But I'm just patiently waiting for it and looking forward to it, anticipating that it will be better than last year. Now, I didn't dislike last year. There were several very good episodes, but my issues were that it didn't kick ass in the way that I thought it would. This season looks as if it will, and I actually think that this season is going to do well on Disney. I think the Christmas episode, for all the fact that I loathed it, did very well on Disney Plus, and I think it hung around in the chart a lot longer than the episodes in the last season. And I think that this season looks as if it is more out there than the last season, and I think that's going to appeal to the Disney audience a bit more than the slightly quirky season we had last year. But this is all conjecture about where we're going to go, what's going to happen. I don't think this is the end of Doctor Who. Of course it isn't the end of Doctor Who. The naysayers and the internet clowns are all banging on about Doctor Who RIP. No, that's not the case. Doctor Who will continue in some form or another because it's too important to the BBC, too important to the UK. Let's see what happens next week. I will, of course, be recording review videos of each episode pretty soon after they're aired to give you my opinion of the episodes. And I'll be doing at some point, I suppose, a feature on the ratings, although they're not a metric now really for success and it's irrelevant. The only people who pay much attention to overnight ratings now for Doctor Who are the people who want it to fail. So they can say, oh, it only had 3 million viewers. When it actually, that's not the way you look at the view figures anymore. But you can't tell them, they won't listen. So I hope you've enjoyed this little rambling video about the future of Doctor Who, the immediate future of Doctor Who, my thoughts about it and my anticipation for it, which is there, but just slightly, flattened down from where it usually is. Hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have been drawn to this because you've seen the Doctor Who symbol in the thumbnail, it'd be lovely to hear from you. Now, I will say, as I always have to say, when it comes to Doctor Who videos, I probably should have said it at the beginning, but if you are thinking of posting Doctor Who's shit, Doctor Who's woke, using woke as a weapon, foolish, RIP Doctor Who, not my doctor, don't post any of that crap, because with Doctor Who videos, I do filter the comments, so if you put that sort of comment, it won't get published online, it won't appear here, because I'll just delete it. So, constructive comments, please. If you don't like Doctor Who for reasons, that's fine, but tell me the reasons. Don't just say it is shit, because I'm not interested in that. That doesn't tell me anything. But if you want to say, I didn't like this story, I didn't like that story, I don't like this character, interested to hear that. But if you just think it's woke crap, then good for you, but don't tell me about it. Right, that's where we are. I will sign off now. If you're interested in getting a Keep Taking the Stuff t-shirt, which I'm not wearing today in honour of talking about Doctor Who, I will leave a link in the description down below where you can pick up one for a very reasonable price. More stuff to come. There's a video coming tomorrow which I'm quite excited about. It's a first impressions video looking at the first episode of a fondly remembered genre show. And there'll be a couple of classic film reviews during the weekend. So please stick around, like, subscribe, leave a comment. I will see you soon, but until I do, keep taking the stuff.